as you know, there are no live sessions today, so we're just going to do math a little different. I have recorded myself teaching you the lesson, and so let's dive in so I can share my screen. You can follow along in your math instructional book on page 204, or you can follow along in the Peer Deck, whichever is easier for you, and that way you can pause the video whenever you need to pause it. Make sure you're taking notes. Okay, so let's get started. Let's go ahead and share this screen of mine. And again, remember, we are working on decimals, so I am going to make this a full screen so you all can see as well. Okay, so we're working on decimals, and we're writing decimals as equivalent fractions. So read the problem below, then explore different ways to write decimals as an equivalent fraction. So the what we have here is a soccer camp has spots for 100 students. So far, 60 of those students are filled. Write an equation of a decimal in hundredths and tenths to show the amount of spots filled. You can use a model, so it's showing us a way to use it. It's doing picture it. You can use a model to understand how to write hundredths or tenths as a fraction. Each model represents a fraction of the soccer camp spots that are filled. So in this one right here, we have hundredths, and there are going to be 60 filled in. And over here, we have tenths, and so there will be 6 spots, right? And so the large square is one whole. And I'm sorry that this thing is right here. Oh, I can move it. Yay. No, I can move it up for you. Okay, so the large square is one whole. Each small square equals 100, right? So this whole right here is 100 little squares. And this is 1 out of 100. 60 small squares are shaded because there are 60 spots filled out of 100 students. We're going back to that problem. Then this one is a large square is a whole. Each section is 10, 1/10. 6 sections are shaded, right? And then so it's just showing us a way to model it or to picture it. And now you can model it. You can use a place value chart to understand how to write hundreds or tenths as a decimal. So the place value chart shows the value of 0.60, right? So our ones, we have 0 ones, then we have our decimal point. We have 6 tenths and 0 hundredths, right? So we're going back to place value, which was in lesson 2, I believe we talked about place value, where we had 10,000s, thousands, hundreds, tens, ones. I hope we all remember that. If not, we can review that on Tuesday. So let's move on and let's connect it. So look at picture it. So you can go back if you need to and pause the video and to where I'm showing picture it. Or you can go back in your Peer Deck and look at picture it. Look at picture it. The model on the left shows 60 squares shaded. What would write the fraction of the model? So now remember, there were 100 students, right? There are 100 students. I'm trying to get my pen ready for you guys. If there are 100 students, what would be my whole number? It didn't let me write for some reason. Maybe I have to go up here. There we go. So what would be, I'm going to use this as my fraction line because it's there. So you should have 100 for your whole number. And how many is it out of? How many parts do we have? We should have 60, right? Because it says the left shows 60 squares are shaded. So again, it was out of 100. So our fraction is 60 out of 100. Then you have to divide the numerator and the denominator by 10 to write the 10th fraction. So again, we have 60 over 100. We're going to divide by 10 because what you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator, right? And I'm going to start at the bottom. 100 divided by 10 is 10. And then we have 60 divided by 10 is 6. So you should have 6 over 10. How does the model on the right with 6 shaded sections show the fraction? How would you word that? How would we word that? So a way you can word that is sorry, not there are. There is 1 whole with 10 parts. 6 out of 10 are shaded. So if you have something close to that, you're in the right ballpark. Okay? And it doesn't have to be word for word. It could be whatever you had for it. And then for number 4, I hope I'm on the right thing. You can actually also have that the model is divided into tenths and 6 tenths is shaded. So that's the same thing that I had here. And then number 4, look at the place value chart. Write the decimal in tenths and an equivalent decimal in hundredths. How are the two decimals different? So how would we write a decimal in tenths? So remember, we have ones, right? And then we have tenths. And then we have our hundredths. So this right here will show us that is a tenth. We have 0.6. Or as Reddy likes to tell us, we have 0 whole and 60 tenths, right? Okay, and then it wants us to write it as 100. So that's our tenths, and now we need to write it as 100. So again, we have 0 wholes, 0 ones, decimal point, 6 tenths, and 0 hundredths. So that is how we would have it. And then it wants to know, how are the two decimals different? And I don't want to see, oh, I just had a 0. No, you don't just add a 0. There is more detail to that. So you could put something like, the hundredth decimal is the same as the tenth decimal, except it has a 0 in the hundredths place. So make sure you're using that place value. So again, the hundredths decimal is the same as the tenths except it has a 0 in the hundredths place. And if you need to pause this video to write this down, you are more than welcome to. If not, you can continue to let it play. And again, I am checking this peer deck to make sure that you have done the work. So make sure you're getting it done. Okay, and for number 5, write a number on each line below to describe how decimals relate to fractions with denominators of 10 and 100. If the denominator of a fraction is 10, the equivalent decimal has what? Has what place value after the decimal? So if this is my decimal point, how many numbers after the decimal point is there going to be? There's only going to be 1. If the denominator of a fraction is 100, the equivalent decimal has blank places after the decimal. So again, if we're working on hundredths, here's my whole, here's my decimal point. How many numbers are we going to have after the decimal? We're going to have 2. Sorry, that line should not be there. All right. So again, if you have questions, write them down so that way I can see them in the peer deck. Write them on a piece of paper so you remember to ask me tomorrow when we are going over this. Now we're going to do try it. Use what you just learned to find related fractions and decimals. Show your work on a separate sheet of paper. If you guys are working on a separate piece of paper, that is fine. If you're working in the peer deck, I want to see your work. So number 6, write a decimal equivalent to 83 hundredths. Now, if you look at number 5, you see, okay, my denominator is 100, so I have to have at least 2 numbers after my decimal, right? And it's not a mixed number, so therefore we know there is no whole. So we can go ahead, put a decimal point there. And we're going to have 83 hundredths. 0.83 hundredths. Very simple. Write a decimal equivalent to 2 tenths. Now again, we look at number 5, we see that the denominator of the fraction is 10. So it's going to have one decimal place, or we're going to have 1 place after the decimal. So only 1 number is going to be after the decimal. So we start with your decimal. And then our number right here, it tells us what it's going to be. And because it's 1, we're not going to add a 0 because that means we're working in the hundredths. So your answer should be 0.2. Draw a model that shows the fraction and the decimal. So you can do right here. We'll do a 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many should I shade in? 2. So therefore, we're only doing the drawing for number 7. So this is what you should have right here. Okay, guys. I have 2 questions for you. My first question, and of course you're going to see these in the peer deck. How could you describe the 2 fractions that the models represent? How can you describe them? So again, like we worked on number 3, number 4, we described the decimals, right? And then, also if we're going back to this slide right here, how could you write 60 hundredths as a decimal with just tenths? Because 60 hundredths is equivalent to 60 tenths. Oh, I almost gave you the answer. Almost gave you the answer, guys. So hopefully this helped. The good thing about this is that it is recorded, so you guys can go back. You can pause it if you need to pause it, or watch it again, whatever is easier for you. Again, if you have any questions, make sure that you are writing down your questions so that way you can ask me tomorrow or send me a message in questions from Miss O. And I hope this helped you guys. And I'll see you. And remember, I'm checking those peer decks. Bye, guys.